model actually allows you to predict national unity. What are the variables that lead to and contribute to one's perception of national unity now and in the future? And we found that personal inter-ethnic relationships might be strong, but the model shows up national policies as a potential problem. So on a personal level, there might not be any problems, but when you juxtapose national unity on a national level, that is where they perceive national unity to be a problem. Okay, I'm going to show you a few charts which are visual, and it helps you to see the dimensions. So we've taken out 5 core variables out of this entire study, and we are showing you in this chart how the different ethnic groups rated the different variables. So you can see, for example, that on all dimensions, economic, education, religious harmony, racial harmony, and national unity, there's a clear pattern. As I said earlier, there are always outer rings and inner rings, and the outer ring shows you the Malay always rating these things to be the highest, followed by the Indians, and then lastly the Chinese in the inner ring. Okay, and this is going to be the same for the next few charts. So again, now this one is a strata breakdown between rural and urban. This is very, very clear cut. I think you can see that on the outer ring, the rural respondents gave significantly higher responses to all of the variables, and the urban respondents gave significantly lower responses. So that's something to look out for. And finally, regional breakdown. Like I said, the regional differences were not as stark, but it is necessary to look at them here, where you see the outer ring is consistently the east and the north, and the inner rings are consistently central and the south, which means that again, it sort of validates this earlier slide, which shows you that the urban, which means Klang Valley and so on, are the more dissatisfied of the lot. So the outer rings and inner rings. Okay, that's a visual representation for you. So in summary, there are actually 5 core policy areas that we have recommended the Department of National Unity to look at, and these are economic policies, education policies, religious policies, policies on racial harmony, and finally the overarching national unity policies, because we do have national unity policies as well. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with you each of these 5 core points, supporting them with some charts. I know the data might be a bit of an overload, and if you want to know more statistics, you can always come back to me. I have all the papers there, the graphs and the frequency charts and so on if you want. So let's go to the first one, economic policies. So there was actually general agreement across the board that the government should change socio-economic policies to help integrate society better. And secondly, government policies to help the poor should apply to all races in Malaysia. So this is interesting because it actually cuts across the board. It's an opportunity to target. So this is a positive sign showing that young Malaysians are open to more inclusive economic policies. And whether or not they have been good for national unity, there are differences in the responses, where again, following the pattern as I mentioned earlier, the Chinese gave significantly negative responses. Rural are more likely to agree that policies are good for national unity, and the study actually shows lots of warning signs of dissatisfaction amongst the Chinese with respect to economic policies. And this is something that we're going to see throughout. So if we had released it before the elections, perhaps some of us might have been better analysts than we were. This is an example of the questions that we asked in the questionnaire. I have a sample here if you want to look at it. Basically, we asked respondents to rate on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is fully disagree and 5 is fully agree, on a number of core components which would then lead to how they perceive economic policies to be good or not good for the country. We talked about some NEP, economic policies are good for national unity, government should change policies to integrate society better, and so on. I think you can read that. Just some charts. I've only selected the ones which are most significant and are most interesting. If you want more, you can also ask me. So this one shows you that the rural respondents were more likely to agree that economic policies were good for national unity. I selected 3 of the questions, and you can see that consistently the rural always rates it higher than the urban. Again, it's always the same pattern. Highest to lowest would be Malays, Indians, and Chinese. Now, some of you might be asking, why is it that the Indians actually gave a relatively high rating for not just this, but all the other variables? Remember that this took place before Hindra, so perhaps some of the things were not highlighted as such. But later on, we look at things like unfair treatment, and there you see very strong underlying currents of how the Indians felt and were already feeling, and some things that should have been noticed beforehand. So number 2, education policies. Different groups view the impact of education policies on national unity very, very differently. Again, Malays were likely to agree that the policies contribute positively to national unity, followed by Indians and Chinese. Rural, positive. Northern and Easterners gave positive ratings, Central region being the most pessimistic. There are worrying signs. All those in red are sort of worrying highlights and hotspots that need to be looked out for. Chinese show strong aversion to education in Malaysia at both school and university level, preferring foreign education over local. So that's something that the Education Ministry should look at. Present education policies are perceived as contributing positively to national unity amongst these groups, Malay, rural, East and North, negatively amongst the Chinese, Central and Urban. So I think you can see